Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to a bit of a different video here. This is an introduction and before the actual video starts. So recently I was rummaging through some old keepsakes and I ran across something that I had completely forgotten about. So when I was 16, back in I believe 1995, I started my first band, which was called More. And within a year, the band was already over. But for some reason, right after it ended, when I was 17, I decided that I was going to write a biography about our band. And honestly, in my memory, I don't really know what the purpose was. If I thought that maybe one day I was going to be a successful rock and roller and maybe people would be interested in reading about my first band, or maybe it was an unconscious way of just getting everything off my chest from the experience. Either way, it's fun. As soon as I read this thing again, I went, this is so hilarious and kind of adorable, really, that I felt like I needed to share it with everyone out there. So what I've done is I put together a little video where I kind of narrate it, and I've included whatever photos or other things from that time period that I actually still have, which is not very many. And there's some clips from our album kind of interspersed. A lot of them you can't really hear, but that's because they kind of suck. So hopefully you'll enjoy this weird sort of trip into my past. And keep in mind that this was written by a 17-year-old who, if I remember right, my big influence when writing this was I had just read Get in the Van by Henry Rollins. And so I think I'm just going to get into it, but just so you know that sometimes I come off sounding like a prick, sometimes I come off sounding like a complete idiot, other times just like an adorable 17-year-old with a little bit of ambition. But anyway, without further ado, please enjoy the story of my first band, More. Chapter 1. The bus ride home was always the longest part of the day for me. I couldn't stand any of the kids riding along with me. This was probably due to the fact that they were all freshmen and I was a junior. They all seemed to talk at exactly the level that made my eardrums ring. Mine was the last stop. One day, a guy with long purple hair got on the bus. I had seen him before because he was a good friend of the drummer of Entropy, a high school metal band who I was friends with as well. I had never talked to him, but I knew his name was Jesse. I noticed his Pantera t-shirt and remarked how I missed their show the weekend before. This sparked a conversation that lasted until we arrived at his stop. I was pleased that I had made a new friend, but that was not what was on my mind. While we were talking, he mentioned that he played the bass guitar. I had been playing guitar for almost a year and had written quite a few songs. I was rather proud of what I had written and desperately wanted to get a band together. Jesse had two things that qualified him: a bass and no band. I asked around to find out how good he was and received mixed opinions. But I really didn't care. I just wanted to play, but I couldn't without a drummer. Soon I met another guitarist named Mark. I wasn't really sure if I wanted a second guitarist, but he assured me that he could play well, sing, and get me a drummer. I had already decided to be the singer, but I figured that if he was good, he could add harmonies to my vocals. He then introduced me to a drummer named Cavett. Jesse agreed to be my bassist, so we set up a practice at his house the following weekend. I was so excited that I really didn't think about the possibility of something going wrong. The week flew by, and the day of Moore's first practice had arrived. I got the name Moore about a half a year earlier, when I saw the soundtrack that Pink Floyd had done for a movie with the same name. I wasn't really into the whole hippie scene, but the name interested me. Everyone desires more of something. Kids want more cookies, and adults want more money. No one ever seems to be satisfied with what they've got, and I knew that I wasn't the least bit satisfied with myself. I thought about this for a while before I realized that it would be an excellent name for a band. I suggested it to all my friends, and they seemed to like it, so I adopted it as the name of my future band. When I arrived at Jesse's house, the garage door was open and the other 3 members of my band were setting up their instruments. I had previously given Mark a copy of my homemade songs in order to save me the trouble of teaching them to him, so I asked him to start playing one of them. I soon realized that the entire thing was a mistake. Mark played like he had never even seen a guitar before, and Cavett could barely keep a beat to save his life. Jesse was the only one who didn't sound like he was playing with his feet. I spent about an hour trying to show Cavett the drum beat that I wanted, but he just couldn't get it. Then Mark began to sing, and I noticed that he was off key. As a matter of fact, I don't remember him being on key the entire day. The lead guitarist of Entropy was watching us, and when Cavett went outside to smoke, he sat down at the drums. He was a good drummer, but unfortunately, he was a guitarist. On the way home, I decided to ditch Mark and Cavett, keep Jesse, and perform as lone guitarist and singer. But I was still minus a drummer. Chapter 2. Almost every weekend, I could be found on The Drag, a popular hangout street for everyone from college students to gutter trash, with a few of the members of Entropy. We would search the record stores for the latest imports, enjoy the best egg rolls we had ever tasted, and basically just goof off. The lead guitarist, Sean, mentioned one afternoon that he was interested in playing the drums, but wasn't sure if he wanted to spend his money on a set. I remembered him playing at the Fatal More practice and suggested that he get one and be in my band. I was expecting him to take it as a joke, but he agreed and decided to ask for a drum set for Christmas. Once again, I was delighted with the idea of my band finally coming together, and still not a single worry entered my mind. I had first introduced myself as a songwriter and performer at an Entropy party. I had recruited Kevin, Entropy's rhythm guitarist, who played bass for this show, and Pat, their drummer, as my one-show band. At that time, my songs were humorous at best. It was a particularly sloppy show due to our lack of practice time, and more than 3/4 of our audience were sitting on their asses the entire time. But nevertheless, I was able to show off what I thought was an incredible talent. Now that my songwriting and talent had matured, I was more than willing to bring this talent to my own band. Christmas came and went, and Sean received his beat-up, old, second-hand drum set. I couldn't have cared less about its condition because I was overwhelmed by the idea that I finally had a complete band. I recorded my new songs and gave the tapes to Sean and Jesse. A week later, we met at Jesse's house for our first practice. I brought along a tape player to record our progress. Because we planned on playing at high volume, I realized the sound that the tape player picked up would be very distorted. So, to filter the sound a bit, we put it inside an old truck that was collecting dust in Jesse's garage. This and the fact that I had only one 60-minute tape made recording rather annoying. When a song sounded good enough, I had to take my guitar off, run around to the driver's side of the truck. The passenger side was blocked. Climb in and start the tape. Run back around, put my guitar back on, and start the song. Now that I think about this, it seems silly that we didn't just wait until we had all the songs down and then record them all at once. We only worked on 5 songs that day, but things seemed to come together well and the songs sounded excellent for a first practice. We continued meeting to practice in Jesse's garage and piss off the redneck neighbors every weekend. About 2 months later, we started planning our first gig. Chapter 3. In mid-February, I got the idea of throwing a birthday party for myself at my house. Not necessarily because I gave a shit that I was turning 17, but because it gave me an excuse to show off my band. We planned it out a few weeks in advance. Entropy would be the headlining band, and we would open for them. I guess we were trying to be modest. We invited about 50 people before I had even figured out where we would be playing. I wanted to play in the backyard on the patio, but it was the rainy season and we couldn't risk damaging our stuff. So we cleaned out our one-car garage and planned to set up in there. There wasn't much room in there, but I figured that we could leave the garage door open and let our audience dance around on the driveway. The day of the show, we practiced our 7 songs, one of which was a rap-like song that Jesse and his friend Bart had written. This song was fun for me because Bart rapped it and I was free to move around as I pleased. People began to show up at about 6:30. I did my best to keep my parents back in their room, but of course, they wanted to take pictures. I finally convinced them that all they would do was embarrass me and they should just be good parents and stay out of the way. I walked back outside and saw that about 25 people had shown so far. After a few minutes of chatting, a good old boy in blue drives up. I didn't want the party to get shut down, so I told everyone not to upset the pig and went to get my dad. After a few minutes of talking, the cop took my dad across the street to the house where this girl, whom I was sure didn't like me too much, lived. My dad came back and told me that they had gone over there and basically told the girl to chill out and let us have fun for a few hours. Who says there are no good cops? We started to play a little early in order to avoid any other police-related interruptions. I had to sing through Entropy's vocal amp and play guitar through mine. We began our first song and I realized that the vocal amp was cutting out on me. So we stopped and I hooked everything up to my amp. It sounded really shitty, but I was so nervous at this point that the audience could have turned into chickens and it wouldn't have fazed me. We once again started our first song and almost everyone had packed into the garage. More people were arriving, and when I looked up, I saw everyone jumping around and really getting into our music. I couldn't stop smiling, and my energy level was way past the hyper stage. When we got to Bart's rap song, I ran out into the crowd and started jumping into people. I'm sure I hit a few with my guitar, but it was all in the name of rock and roll. Entropy started about a half hour after we finished. There was barely enough space in the garage to fit them and their equipment, but still some people packed in and moshed into them. After a few songs, someone, I don't remember who, pointed over to the side wall of the garage. Suddenly, I wished I had never had this party. There was a big dent in the wall, and parts of it had chipped and broken off. I ran, grabbed a mic, and told everyone to cut the shit and get back. Amazingly, my parents weren't too upset, and the show continued. When Entropy had finished, we moved the party to a nearby school playground until everyone had to leave. Chapter 4. After the show, we knew exactly what it was time to do. It was time to record an album. No, not in a studio on a 12-track or something, but in my garage on a crappy karaoke machine that I had gotten for Christmas. We all got together on a Saturday that my parents were out of town and started recording in the early afternoon. We set up our one recording mic in the middle of the garage with our amps and the drums surrounding it. The sound quality was poor, and we made a good amount of mistakes, but for some reason it didn't matter. We recorded our 6 songs along with Bart's rap. After we finished the songs, we fucked around for a while and recorded it all. Some of the stuff ended up on the album as extra tracks. Later, a few friends showed up to hang out with us. They were followed by a few more, and a few more. Even a few people I didn't care to have in my home showed up. But I decided to be a nice guy and just put up with them. By about midnight, I was ready for everyone to leave. So I had to cancel my nice guy act and kick all but a few of them out. Jesse went out and got laid in one girl's car and didn't come back until the early morning. We definitely had the sex and rock and roll stuff down. All that was left were the drugs. We made copies of the tape on a dual cassette stereo and made sleeves for them. We produced about 30 tapes and sold them to anyone at our school that would actually pay $3 for one. We were out in just a week or two and began to develop a following of our own. We continued to get together on weekends to practice, goof off, and occasionally smoke pot. I had recently found a love interest, so my weed-toking days were over after about a month. The other 2 continued. Jesse had already been smoking up a lot and started doing acid. I tried not to let it bother me. Chapter 5. We soon wrote a couple of new songs and started planning for our next gig. It was to be held at Jesse's house in a little room that had once been used for an Entropy party. There was a lot of trouble getting the okay from the neighbors, but Jesse soon worked it all out. We, or at least I, wanted this party to be a big one. We gathered an unusual group of bands to open for us. Our tape had gotten a little popular at our school, and I guess we thought we were hot shit. We, of course, got Entropy to help warm up the crowd for us. Also on the list was Episode 4, a very talented band of 20-somethings. Lesh 9, an innovative band that sounded something like the Violent Femmes being raped by a chimpanzee. The More Rejected Cavett was the drummer for this band. And a couple of shitty, and let's be fair, talentless bands not really worth writing about, one of which included the More guitarist for a day, Mark. We invited everyone in throwing distance and even made more stickers to give away at the show. We showed up early on the day of the show to help clean out the room in which we would be playing. After that, we just goofed around all afternoon until people started to show up. Episode 4 played first. About 10 people were in the room and only a few seemed interested in their music. This was a pity because they were really a good band. Next up was Entropy. By this time, a good number of people had shown up. They all packed into the room, jumped around, and yelled along to every song. The next few bands are a blur. They were mostly crappy, except for Lesh 9, and were interrupted by the cops a few times. The cops had been called on someone, but I never really found out what was going on. It was funny to see everyone hiding their drugs and freaking out when the pigs came into the house. We were afraid that we wouldn't be able to play, but Jesse's dad talked to them and more went on as scheduled. It was way too hot and I was already tired from the other bands, but we started our first song with a lot of energy. I was amused to see everyone singing along to something that I had written. The cops interrupted our set once for noise complaints. One of my guitar strings broke. Sean was tired. I was mouthing off about people who liked Stone Temple Pilots, and the crowd was thinning. But overall, it was probably our best show. I got to play the drums on a song that Sean had written while he took over the guitar and vocal duties. By this time, my energy was almost completely drained. The room filled up again for Bart's rap and a couple of the joke songs from the end of our tape. We finished, I thanked the crowd for putting up with us, went outside, and fainted on the lawn across the street. I didn't black out, but I felt like I had just been on American Gladiators or something. Chapter 6. Not too long after the show at Jesse's house, we set up another gig at some other guy's house. We would be playing with Lesh 9 and the shitty bands again. We still got together and practiced at times, but a strange distance seemed to be growing between us. It was mostly due to girls. Jesse and I had steady girlfriends, and this sometimes got in the way of practice. I didn't invite my girlfriend to our practices so that everyone would feel that I was totally focused. But Jesse's annoying girlfriend just happened to stop by at what seemed like every practice. This caused Jesse to want to stop playing early and generally broke my concentration. I had been really sick the week before we were scheduled to play. I was just barely getting over it on the day of the show. My throat was really fucked up, so I didn't want to sing. I assigned the vocal duties of certain songs to my friends. The singer and the rhythm guitarist of Entropy would each sing one. I would struggle to sing the rest. We played in this guy's backyard, which was swarming with mosquitoes. Jesse showed up decked out in full kicker gear. Our entire set was very sloppy. I couldn't tell you if the two Entropy guys fucked up the songs or not. I was too distracted by the fact that my nose was running like a squirrel on a football field. Between songs, I would try desperately to get rid of as much snot as possible. When I had to sing, it sounded like Tom Waits on a bad day. I was more than happy to finish the set and blow my nose some more. I hung out with my girlfriend and a few of the Entropy guys for the rest of the evening. Chapter 7. During the summer, Entropy set up a show at a place called the Eco Action Warehouse. This was our first paid gig. It was to be held in August, right before my senior year of school started. We would again be playing with Entropy and all those other bands that we just couldn't seem to get rid of. Also on the bill were the Impossibles, a local ska pop band that I was a fan of. There was also another band that I didn't know called Wookiee Cartel. Everyone was very excited. There were flyers passed out all over the place. This would hopefully be the show that made us. We practiced as much as possible and wrote a couple of new songs. Throughout the summer, I repeatedly tried to get Jesse off drugs. It was beginning to bother me because I had recently found my way down the anti-drug path. He told me numerous times that he was quitting, but he was always back on them after a few days. Sean was also riding the drug train occasionally. I began to wonder if I really wanted them in my band anymore. Even though this was upsetting me, I kept it to myself in hopes that it would soon blow over. The big day arrived, and we were ready. The Eco Action Warehouse was basically a recycling plant with a stage in the middle. We carpooled with members of Entropy and were the first to arrive. We all bunched our gear together in a corner and waited for the other bands. They arrived just in time for the first of the shitty bands to set up. I was not surprised to hear that they had not gotten any better. The few people that were there for the first couple of bands didn't really seem to notice that there was any music playing at all. More people began to show up as Les Nine were playing. A couple of those people were my parents. I thought I had done a good job of avoiding telling my parents where the place was, but I've never understood parents enough to fool them. It was finally our time to play. We helped the other band get their gear off stage and ours on. When I picked up my guitar and started playing, I found that it was out of tune. A few seconds later, I realized that it was not going to be in tune. I begged for another guitar, and the guitarist of Les Nine lent me his. I soon discovered that not only did I despise his guitar, but my amp sounded horrible. I didn't feel like dealing with it, so I played the entire set with fucked up sound. Only about 5 people were watching us. The rest of them were talking or playing hacky sack in the back. But for a few songs, I guess they were the big hits from our tape, everyone ran up to the front and started their little mosh thing. Moshing always seems really silly until it's being done to your music. The last song was our version of Lionel Richie's Say You, Say Me. Almost everyone came up to the front to sing along. Some people even got on stage and sang with me. Overall, we got a pretty good response and each band member made about $20. But I had a weird feeling about the future of my band. I should probably quit playing music and start fortune telling. I'd make more money. Chapter 8. Over the next month or so, we practiced less and less due to the fact that I had gotten a job. When we did get together to practice, it felt like a chore. The fun had almost totally disappeared. We tried to get new songs together, but it just didn't work. The rhythm guitarist of Entropy organized a party at his house sometime around early October. I was tampering with the idea of adding a second guitarist, so I asked him to play with us as an experiment. He agreed, and we practiced at his house about a week or two before the party. There was a guy from our school newspaper at our rehearsal. He ended up writing some flop about how we were the most innovative of the high school bands and other bullshit. I just thought it was amusing. No one, outside of our friends, read it anyway. Before I knew it, the day had come, the party had begun, and our first song was already being played. I wanted only one guitar for the first couple of songs, so this left me free to jump around and sing. Throughout the show, I noticed that Jesse's bass playing was off, and sometimes even non-existent. Sean was making plenty of mistakes and slowing down occasionally. Our test guitarist made his share of mistakes, but he only played for the first 4 songs. The crowd was small but rowdy inside of this 2-car garage. In the spirit of Moore's garage shows, the wall was even dented in during our set. The time had finally come to play Say You, Say Me, and I remembered the big sing-along that occurred at the last show. Before I could introduce it, I heard Sean say that he wanted to stop. I reminded him that we still had a few songs left, but he didn't seem to care. So I told the audience, with a little bit of anger and disappointment, that we were finished. I didn't want to look at anyone. My emotions had built to a strange level. After all our equipment was out of the garage, I walked up to Jesse and told him that I wanted to get rid of Sean. He got angry and told me that he was a part of the band too, and he should have a say in it as well. So I told him that we would talk later. I walked away with my decision already made. I was leaving the band. Chapter 9. The next month is a blur to me. I only remember Sean calling me at work to find out what was going on. I told him that I didn't want to be in the band anymore, followed by some words of criticism. He then hung up on me. I could never reach Jesse, who had recently started attending another high school due to discipline problems. But he called me about a week later, and we talked about it. After that, there was a great distance between us for some time. Of course, I later regretted the breakup, but I think we had gone as far as we could go. Our time was up. It didn't take long for Sean and I to become friends again. We tried to avoid talking about more, but something always seemed to slip out. He started a new band with Jesse and the drummer of Entropy. I didn't talk to Jesse much for a while. At the time of this writing, I still hadn't found anyone new to play with. I wasn't trying very hard to find anyone. School and work took up most of my time, and whatever time I had left, I spent with my girlfriend. I started an acoustic duo with the singer of Entropy. It was mostly folk-type stuff, but it was musically keeping me happy. I like to look at the life and death of Moore as a period of growth, both musically and mentally. But the name Moore will never again be used in a band of mine. I've had funny ideas of using no more or less, but I'd rather just leave it alone. Being in another band called More would be like walking in your dead grandmother's shoes. Sure, they're perfectly comfortable shoes, but you will always remember that an old lady used to trot around in them. I'm not sure what that meant. All right, that was it. Hopefully, if you're still here, I'm guessing that you enjoyed it. Some of that shit is pretty cringeworthy to me. Some of it just downright hilarious. But I mean, it's funny because some of it I don't have a clear recollection on, so I don't. And in the writing, I don't really go into my feelings about certain things here and there. It's. I guess at the time I thought it was obvious, but maybe it is. But I really feel like if I wrote that now, there would be a lot more. I'd go more in depth about why I felt the way that I did about certain things. But it is what it is at this point, and it's a snapshot of me as a 17-year-old. And hopefully you found it entertaining somehow. Yeah, thank you for watching. Put your comments down below. What did you think? Maybe put some thoughts about your first band. If you've been in bands in your life, how did it go? Because that was the first of many bands for me. But definitely, I guess, one of the most memorable, it being the first. So yeah, enough of my rambling. If you've made it this long, thank you very much for watching. And if this was a complete self-indulgent thing, I'm glad that you indulged with me. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you all again very soon.